Good evening. This is Tony Dottino. I am the founder of the USA Memory Championship and the president of Dottino Consulting Group, doing my Live with Tony and continuing on the series that I started on aging well and the impact on families. And when I talk about aging well, I've been referencing an article that came out of an issue of Epoch Times. And I'm trying to see the date of this issue. It's a centerpiece on mind and body. It comes out of the Epoch Times. And they've been talking, and I've been talking about a book that was written by John Robbins, Healthy 100, and asking people who are over 100, how did they do that? What were the characteristics of their lives and the behaviors? And then I want to parallel, integrate an article I was reading today. The kids are not all right. That comes out of the current issue of Time magazine. So it's the August 3rd, August 10th issue of Time magazine, and some things in here that are rather startling that really tie back to what we have in terms of learning to age well that we talked about last night, and that was in this notion of positivity. And how do we find the things that impact what I call our GIGG? So I put in my notes there, this is all about our GIGG and how do we make the decisions on which way we want to send our GIGG. Now, what is GIGG? The thing that we need to recognize is that our brain is constantly working. It has an infinite amount of biology to continue to have us thinking and feeling, which makes us our behaviors in our lives as we are today. And what's important to know about your GIGG is you get to control it. So now what does GIGG stand for? Based on the inputs that you are having into your brain, so the I stands for inputs, your brain has the ability to synergize and build within its own thinking what the patterns of thought you want to capture and encode. Remember. And if we're not sensitive to the directions that our GIGG goes, then we can start with feeding things into our brain that I'll call for tonight garbage, meaning they put you into a negative stress and a state of anxiety. And so garbage coming in, and garbage will grow. So GIGG is garbage in, garbage will grow if we're not mindful of what we're listening to, what we're hearing, what we're talking about. Now, the blessing that we have, where I say the decision is ours, so the fork in the road comes, you get to choose. The garbage in the input side can be modified if we become aware of and conscious of what we're inputting and how it's impacting our thinking. We can change that to good in, and good will grow. And better yet, we can focus on greatness in, and greatness will grow. And so our first position, G, it has to be filtered in terms of what are we listening to, what are we talking about, who's impacting our thought processes, what music do we listen to, what books and magazines, what newspapers, what television stations. Because here's what's happening right now. What they're talking about is the kids are not all right. And what the article is going on to say is that kids are having a difficult time losing their routines, not seeing their friends, not going back to, are they going back to school or are they not? What's happening to mom or dad? Mom and or dad are home. They're not at work. I'm at home trying to do something. Mom and dad are there. And so when we talk about aging well, one of the things our centurions are telling us is you want to maintain positivity. And what this is going on to tell us is that our kids are not all right because they're moving from a state of stress to anxiety to when is this ever going to be over? And therefore, there's a risk involved if we're not addressing our GIGG and that of our family members. There's a risk that can be taken that carries these family members throughout their life. And so the article in Times goes on to talk about we all want to be able to someday reflect back in our memories about the time we went through a pandemic called COVID-19. Well, how are we positioning our own thinking and locking in our own memories to make sure that as we reflect back on those times we're living in right now, we have a positivity and we have a kindness about how we're looking at it that puts us into a creative spirit and a creative mode, as opposed to one where we've disrupted routines and now we're going to go into post-traumatic stress. And therefore, now's the time, if we're talking of all ages, to age well, now is the time to be aware of what we're listening to, how that's being encoded into our minds, how our emotions are being reflected in all of that, the stability that we have with our family members, the conversations that we have in hugging one another and being there to support one another through a very challenging time in our life that I hope we, all of us, never see again. Excuse me. Oh, I don't know where that came from. I did use my arm. But in any case, what's important for everybody to realize is as we process what we're seeing and watching and feeling the stress, excuse me again, as we are processing the information coming at us, it talks about anxiety, because anxiety is being created more and more in people and in family members because we don't feel that we're in control. And how many of us, how many of you that listen to my Live with Tony broadcast really feel like, my goodness, my life is out of control and I just want to keep it that way. And I want to just keep bouncing off of walls. So what this is going on to say about the kids, there's much more anxiety. They're afraid of their own self. So what's happening to me and how is that being explained to them? And they're worried about their parents and what happens if one of their parents gets sick. I was talking with some kids about that, and their worry is, I don't want mom and dad to get sick. And in some cases, the kids go to that next extreme based on what they hear and see. And what would I ever feel like? What would I ever do? So here we go back to learning to age well. So if we're looking to age well, what we're trying to do is we're trying to help one another. So I want to take something from my Healthy 100s. So what are we doing to help one another? How do we hug and talk to one another? How do we, first of all, get people to talk to one another in a way that will be rememberable in the sense that we've shared our emotions, we've had a level of empathy in the conversations, and nobody's like, no, ever say, you shouldn't feel that way. It's, how do we overcome those feelings of anxiety, this loss of control, and when is this ever going to end? So now we start with the kids. Well, the kids sometimes are mirrors of what the parents are feeling and doing. And so now we want to look at, so how do we help one another? Another thing is taking the responsibility for what you can pull back and control. So in our seniors, they're talking about how do we take responsibility. So where can we grab some level of control and establish routines in our life and establish different patterns of thinking and actions that give us some semblance of getting some part of our life back into a routine and some part of our life back to where we feel that we're doing the best we can to stay well. The next thing is having a positive outlook. So if you start to think about your gig, one of the things that you might want to do in the family dinner tables conversation is to ask each of the family members, so what was something that transpired during the day that brought a level of positivity? It brought a level of a smile or something that was brought about in the day's experience that are worth sharing and or talking about. And so we want to maintain a level of positive gig. Good in and good will grow. And I talk with some people on some of my Zooms, and they're saying, my goodness, my business, my work hours, I'm just exploded because I have something of value that people want, and therefore I don't have enough time in the day to relax and isolate or be to myself because things are so successful and things are so wonderful. So now, is that a good thing, or is that what part of your gig is that going to control? Because there's opportunities for people that are coming out of this that present themselves to greatness. What else do I want to do? We want to stay physically active. So how are we keeping the family members all physically active? And so there's different YouTube videos on Facebook on physical activities, and maybe the family, with my other half, we do exercises together every day. And it's always great to have an exercise buddy. Well, I happen to have my significant person in my life, my friend and lover in my life, who's my exercise buddy. And we do exercises that helps one another. So we're engaged in not going to the gym, but we're helping one another in terms of physical exercise. And then last, what are we doing to monitor the nutritional habits? So how do we keep all of the right nutritional habits in place for the kids, for the mom, for the dad, for grandma and grandpa? How do we make sure everybody's eating as well as they can and their nutritional habits are positive? And so during this period of time, I've been very rigid about maintaining a healthy diet. I could control it because I'm home all day long, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I've been able to lose some weight that I haven't been able to do for a number of years. It's sad to me when I hear people say, but they've put weight on, which then tells me what? They may be eating from stress and anxiety, which now we have a chance to, let's start changing our gig, and let's see if we can encode positive memories of things we've done together during this very challenging period of time that we'll want to talk about in 10 years and reflect back on in a most loving, caring, and positive way. That's my messaging for tonight. I will be back on Thursday, tomorrow at 3 o'clock doing let's see, I got a couple of minutes. I should be good on 3 o'clock tomorrow, somewhere in that time period. I do my Thursday afternoon and then back on Saturday at 3 o'clock. So have a good evening and think about something that was good that I've just shared with you that can make a difference in how you conversation or have you dialogue with your family members during dinner, breakfast, or lunch.